What if a single piece of paper could shatter everything you thought you knew about your family? Anne stumbled upon a love letter, its secrets poised to unravel her entire identity. What treasures or troubles could lie within the words of a long-forgotten romance? How would this revelation change Anne's understanding of her whole life? Anne stood in the dim light of her late mother's bedroom, the air thick with nostalgia, and the faint scent of lavender that lingered in the corners. Each item she touched echoed memories of childhood laughter and tender moments, yet they also whispered secrets that had lain dormant. She could feel the waves of grief rolling over her, nestled among the fond recollections. Then her eyes landed on an old, dust-covered box tucked away on a shelf, barely visible beneath a mound of forgotten scarves. Curiosity drew her closer, and as she lifted the lid, a rush of emotion surged through her. Inside, layers of items from her mother's past lay haphazardly strewn. Old photographs, trinkets that sparkled with memory, and woven stories that spoke of another life. But at the very bottom, half hidden and longing to be touched, she discovered a piece of paper, a love letter. Her fingers trembled as she grasped the fragile parchment, its edges yellowed with age. With every careful unfolding, her heart raced, bracing for the flood of revelations it would bring. As her eyes skimmed the words, her breath caught in her throat. The letter was penned with a sincerity that made her feel like an unwitting intruder in a world she had never known. It spoke of a profound connection between her mother and a man unnamed, a man Anne had never heard of. Confusion swirled within her, merging seamlessly with betrayal, and she felt anger rise like bile in her throat. How could she keep this from me? Anne thought, her heart pounding. Hope and warmth curled gently in her chest, but they were soon entwined with disbelief. She read on, each line revealing fragments of her mother's soul, details of a life filled with emotion and passion that reflected a side of her mother Anne had never grasped. A flicker of obsession ignited within her, a desperate need to uncover the truth hidden beneath these intimate words. As the letter whispered secrets of a secret love, a new layer was woven into the fabric of her memories. Anne struggled to reconcile the mother she adored with the woman who had felt so deeply for someone she had never spoken of. The letter served as a symbolic anchor to a past steeped in complexities and shadows, wrapping her in a tumult of emotions. Anne's heart ached at the thought that the person she had idolized could hold depths she couldn't possibly comprehend. Each sentence she read was a dagger to the heart, echoing her internal conflict. Would peeling back these layers protect her mother's memory? Or would they tarnish the image she had held dear, torn between reverence for the past and a longing for the truth? Her emotional storm raged fiercely within. Time slipped through her fingers, and with a determined breath, she resolved to take action. "I need to confront Marianne," she whispered to herself, her voice hoarse with urgency. Marianne, her mother's best friend, was a gatekeeper of the memories that could shed light on the secrets that had shadowed her childhood. The prospect of what truths might emerge sent a ripple of emotional turbulence through her. The love letter had opened a door to a past she desperately needed to understand, and now she was driven to uncover the complexities that lay buried beneath the surface. Would she find the answers she sought, or would they lead to more heartache? Time was running out, and with the shadows of her mother's unspoken truths pushing at her, Anne could feel the weight of revelation pulling her closer to the edge. Every heartbeat echoed in Anne's ears as she lay in bed that night, her mind racing with uncertainty. What if the truth is more painful than the lie? She mused, flipping through the vibrant memories of her mother's anecdotes that had always painted their family as harmonious. Suddenly, the familiar warmth of nostalgia twisted into doubt, clawing at her heart. Who was her mother, really? The loving figure she had adored, or a woman with secrets cloaked in shadows? The weight of these questions pressed heavily upon her as sleep eluded her, leaving her tangled in a web of expectation and dread. The following morning, the world outside her window seemed bathed in a surreal glow, as if teasing her fragile state of mind. She arrived at Marianne's quaint cafe, where the air was rich with the aroma of brewed coffee and sweet pastries, yet all she felt was the raw taste of anxiety. It was a sanctuary of comfort for many, but for Anne, it now felt like a stage set for confrontation. With each flickering light overhead, her heart thudded louder, urging her to find clarity amidst the chaos churning inside. When she finally spotted Marianne, she approached with determination, but the older woman's gaze flickered to a distant memory, leaving Anne on edge. "Can you tell me about the man my mother mentioned in the letter?" Anne asked, forcing the words out even as her throat felt constricted. Marianne's smile was a tight mask, her eyes clouded with an unease that wrapped around Anne like a shroud. "Sometimes the past is better left buried, dear," she replied, her voice threading a delicate line between caution and concern. Anne felt a spark of frustration ignite within her. "Please, I need to know." With a resigned sigh, Marianne leaned closer. "It's more complicated than you think, Anne. Your mother and we had our share of history intertwined with that man. There were things that happened that life chose not to tell," she began, each word dripping with layers of unspoken memories. As fragments of a tangle emerged, Anne found herself wrestling between disbelief and anger. A secret love affair? Family dynamics painted in colors she never even knew existed? The thought sent ripples of turmoil through her heart. "But why didn't she tell me?" Anne pressed, her voice rising, desperation clawing at her chest. The older woman hesitated, looking as if she were caught in a whirlwind of her own emotions. "Because some truths can shatter the beautiful image you hold dear, Anne. Trust once bent can break beyond repair. Her choice to shield you was out of love. But love can be complicated, messy." Anne clenched her fists, torn between her loyalty to the mother she thought she knew and the yearning for the truth that felt tantalizingly close yet impossibly out of reach. With every ambiguous remark Marianne delivered, frustration simmered just below the surface, setting her spirit ablaze with the need for clarity. As they neared the conclusion of their conversation, Anne's desire for connection collided with a burgeoning anger that roiled within her. "If there are secrets, I deserve to know," she urged, her voice steady but strained. "I can't disclose everything, Anne," Marianne stated firmly, yet her demeanor softened. "There's so much more history in your family than you realize. The past shadows the present, and sometimes it's healthier not to dig up old bones." Reeling from the emotional tension entwined in her aunt's words, Anne left the cafe, the door swinging shut behind her like a muffled heartbeat. The cool air hit her, yet it did nothing to calm the storm brewing inside. Questions tangled in her mind, each one more pressing than the last. Time was running out. Could she trust Marianne? She found herself staring at the ground, her steps heavy with intention as she contemplated her next move. Determined, Anne set her sights on her estranged aunt, ready to unearth the roots of the familial history she had only glimpsed through the vague reflections of a love letter. What lay beyond the threshold of that next conversation could very well change everything she had ever believed. Secrets awaited her. As Anne parked in front of her aunt's house, she hesitated, the familiar facade suddenly feeling alien. The place held echoes of laughter from her childhood, whispers of days spent playing with her cousins, But now it loomed over her like a dark cloud, filled with doubt and unspoken words. The weight of her family's past pressed heavily on her shoulders as she stepped onto the porch. Each creak of the wooden boards was a reminder of all that had gone unsaid. The door opened, and there stood her aunt. Usually the life of the party, yet somehow dimmed. The vibrant colors she adorned seemed muted now, and her hesitant smile felt cautious. "Anne," she said, her voice a delicate lace, overlaying a thick tension. "It's been a while." "Yeah, too long," Anne replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The atmosphere was thick with old rivalries and buried resentments, a volatile concoction simmering just beneath their pleasantries. Each word felt rehearsed and every laugh too hollow. Still, as they exchanged mundane updates, Anne felt the gnawing ache of 1,000 emotions rise within her, the joy of reunion tangled with the sorrow of what lay unacknowledged between them. Taking a deep breath, she ventured into deeper waters. "I found a letter from Mom," Anne said, her voice slightly shaky, the admission raw against her throat. The mention of her mother hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. She hoped to bridge the distance between them, even as she sensed the tension tightening around her like a vice. At the mention of the letter, her aunt stiffened, the warmth of her expression fading completely. "That old thing?" she snapped, the abruptness cutting like ice. "There's nothing there. Just words." Anne's heart plummeted as her aunt's defensiveness ignited a firestorm of memories, summers spent in this house where love and laughter sometimes mingled with distant whispers of conflict. "No," Anne pressed gently. "There's something deeper. I need to understand her. Can you help me?" Each word dripped with desperate hope as she searched her aunt's eyes for a flicker of recognition or compassion. As if struck, her aunt exhaled sharply and the guard around her began to crack. "Your mother was tangled up in things you wouldn't begin to comprehend. There were rivalries, affairs, generational betrayals," she revealed brusquely, her words a sudden cascade, shattering the idyllic image Anne so desperately clung to. Anne felt the world spin as her aunt's revelations unfurled before her, each detail painting a picture that was far grimmer than she had ever imagined. Memories began to rush back, stories whispered over family dinners, glances exchanged between her mother and aunt, laden with unsaid grudges. The fabric of Anne's understanding ripped apart and transformed, weaving in flashes of the past alongside her aunt's words. Aunt Penny emotively recounted tales, a hidden treasure trove of letters and photographs, lovingly tucked away, each hiding secrets of a family history steeped in love and disappointment. "Your mother wrote letters," her aunt continued, her tone shifting from defensive to reflective. "So many letters. About someone else. Someone you've never met. Those words might guide you to the truth of who she really was." Anne absorbed these stories, her resolve hardening though her heart ached. There, amid the laughter and pain, she began to see the deep fractures within her family, pathways forged through choices, mistakes, and revelations fraught with consequence. They drew a complicated portrait of her mother, one that resided beyond the simplistic memories of childhood. As the conversation deepened, the emotional landscape intensified, a storm of past grievances and painful truths swirling around them. Armed with these newfound revelations, Anne felt the ground beneath her shift. Standing at this precipice, she wavered, grappling with the implications of her mother's legacies and questioning everything she held as truth. What other truths lurk in these hidden letters? She wondered silently, her heart thrumming with anxiety and burgeoning resolve. The knot in her stomach was tight, but a flicker of determination ignited within her. She was just beginning to understand the complexities of her family, and she knew this was only the beginning of an arduous journey toward unraveling the tangled threads of love and betrayal. Anne lay in her dimly lit room, the weight of her aunt's revelations pressing down on her chest like a heavy blanket. Every family has skeletons in their closet, but what if mine were more than just bones? The thought spiraled through her, relentless and haunting. Waves of anger and profound sadness crashed over her, colliding with cherished memories that now felt tainted by the truth. She had once held her family as untarnished, but now isolation crept in, leaving her feeling as though she were standing on the edge of a vast chasm, staring down into an uncertain darkness. She sat upright in her bed, the shadows dancing across the walls, illuminating her turmoil. "I can't stay silent anymore," she muttered under her breath, a flicker of determination igniting amidst the chaos. Reaching for her notebook, she grabbed her pen and began to write. Tears blurred her vision as the words spilled onto the page, a cathartic release of her pent-up emotion. "You betrayed her," she scrawled, the ink appearing nearly as raw as the pain in her heart. With each sentence, she voiced her pain and confusion, longing for understanding amid the storm of her thoughts. Yet deep down, she recognized that confrontation was inevitable. "I need to hear him say it," she whispered, determination overtaking the doubt lingering in her mind. The next day dawned dreary and overcast, mirroring her own unease. She found her father in the living room, the faint glow of morning sunlight casting long shadows across the floor. Steeling herself, she sat opposite him, her heart racing. She searched his eyes for assurance, for something that resembled the love she once thought was unwavering between them. "Dad," she began, her voice trembling, "we need to talk." The words hung in the air, crackling with tension. Her pulse quickened as she spoke, each frustration that had simmered beneath the surface boiling over. "I can't understand why you kept this from me. Why didn't you ever talk about Mom's affair?" The accusation hung between them, sharp and jagged. His expression hardened, and Anne felt an unexpected wave of defensiveness wash over him. "You don't understand, Anne. It was complicated," he retorted, his voice straining to remain steady. But the truth was like a dam breaking, resolve faltering against the flood of emotions, as he added, "I knew about it. I had to protect your mother, even if it meant hiding the truth from you." Anne felt the world tilt beneath her feet. The betrayal rang in her ears like a distant bell, tolling the end of innocence. The very foundation of her family seemed to tremble. "Protect her?" she shot back, incredulous. "By lying to me? By allowing me to believe in something that never existed?" Silence enveloped the room, thick and suffocating. Her father's gaze dropped, and in that moment, heartbreak blanketed Anne. The man she trusted most was complicit in her mother's deception, and with that realization, she grappled not only with her mother's betrayal, but with her father's fracture as well. "You could have told me the truth, Dad," she said, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "You could have been honest." She was no longer a child asking for comfort. She was a daughter seeking honesty about her family's fractured legacy. The confrontation shifted their dynamics profoundly. She faced him not just as a parent, but as a complex figure entwined in her mother's past. "How can I ever trust either of you?" she murmured, the words heavy with both fury and sorrow. With that, Anne stood, the emotional tension still thick in the air as she turned away from her father. Unsure of what the future held, she stepped into the hallway and took a deep breath, determined to find the closure and understanding she so desperately needed. Yet the uncertainty loomed, a shadow over the path ahead. The emotional aftermath of the confrontation lingered like a haunting melody in Anne's mind, pulling at her heart. yet stealing her resolve. With each step she took, bruised by harsh words but more determined than ever, she found herself gravitating toward paper and pen. Her hand shook slightly as she began to write a letter to her mother, each stroke serving as both a release and an exploration. "Dear Mom," she wrote, allowing her thoughts to flow unfiltered. "I don't know how to express the mix of anger and sorrow I feel. I want to understand you, not just as my mother, but as the woman you were before I was born." The words carried her hurt, but they also cradled an emerging sense of empathy, pushing her to explore the complexities of her mother's choices. With her heart laid bare on paper, writing soon became a catharsis, a vessel for all the pent-up emotions she had held inside. As she poured out her feelings, the burden of resentment began to ease, making room for a new understanding. "I see you now, flawed and beautiful," she reflected, recognizing the shared humanity that connected them. Days passed in a blur. As she navigated through the routine of everyday life, memories surfaced, moments from her childhood that flickered to life like scattered pieces of a puzzle. She sifted through old photographs, holding each image carefully between her fingers. Her mother's laughter captured mid-chuckle in a sunlit garden, the two of them at the beach with damp hair and sandy toes. These remnants of happier times surged with warmth, infusing her with nostalgia and heartache alike. Anne began to see her mother's legacy in a new light. The duality of love and loss pressed upon her. It was no longer just a tale of betrayal, but a narrative full of nuances. In the depths of her reflection, she witnessed her mother's smile, bright and infectious, and felt the echoes of joys and difficulties they had shared. Just as she reached a semblance of peace with the past, an unexpected envelope arrived in the mail with a familiar postmark that tugged at her memory. It came from her childhood neighborhood. She felt a spark of curiosity igniting within her, urging her to unveil what secrets the envelope might hold. With shaking hands, she opened it, revealing contents that hinted at further family enigmas. Inside lay old photographs, grained and yellowed with age, whispering stories that had remained buried for so long. The moment she laid her eyes on them, suspense danced around her, thrilling and uncertain, heart racing. Anne peered closer, eager to piece together the fragments of her family's story. As she opened the first photograph, each image could be a clue, a thread that tied her mother's past to her own, promising new revelations that could upend everything she thought she knew. What secrets are hidden in those photographs, she wondered, her pulse quickening with anticipation. And will they lead to more revelations? The question lingered, a tantalizing promise of the journey ahead, pulling her deeper into the heart of her family's narrative with each turn of the page. Every photograph tells a story. But what if this one reveals a secret life? Anne stared at the image in her hand, feeling a knot tighten in her stomach. Her mother, radiant and alive, stood beside a man she had never seen before. The way they laughed together, their connection palpable even in stillness, sent waves of confusion crashing over her settled beliefs. It felt as though the love letter she had discovered had been emboldened by this visual proof of her mother's deep connections that now forced Anne to question everything she thought she knew. Who was this man? The question echoed in her mind, amplifying her sense of urgency. What part did he play in her mother's life? As shadows deepened around her, Anne felt a familiar ache, a blend of longing and unease. She needed answers, and fast. With each unanswered query, the truth felt more elusive, and the sense of doubt reared its head. Clenching her hands around the photograph, she set out with newfound determination. The quest would lead her to family friends, those who might fill in the gaps of the narrative she had been told. illuminating shadows with the light of forgotten stories. Her first visit was to the McKinleys, old acquaintances of her mother. The moment she stepped inside their cozy home, nostalgia washed over her like a tide. Photos lined the walls, capturing moments of joy and laughter, images that felt foreign yet achingly familiar. "Anne, dear, come sit," Mrs. McKinley called out, her voice buoyant but laced with a hint of melancholy. As Anne settled in, she couldn't help but feel the weight of expectation. "I found something of my mother's," she began hesitantly, unsure how to unravel the intricacies of her heart's burden. "I want to understand her better." Mrs. McKinley's eyes softened, and encouragement glimmered in her gaze. "Your mother was a force, Annie. She loved fiercely." Witnessing the layers of her mother's character unfold through the stories shared created a complex tapestry of memories. Each recollection carried nuances that shifted Anne's perception. Her mother wasn't just a nurturing figure. She was also a woman who had fought against struggles and hidden desires, a person full of resilience and vulnerability. Yet with each story, Anne felt her previous hurt, as a daughter transform into a different persona, a curious investigator, unearthing not just the shadows of her mother's past, but her familial bonds too. The transition sparked an internal revolution, igniting a desire to embrace the complexities of love that existed in tandem with betrayal. She realized that families often wear masks to disguise the pain underneath. Her exploration pulled her deeper into her mother's world, yet she couldn't shake off the flickering doubts. Tales of rivalries surfaced, revealing long-buried animosities that threatened her peace. How many more secrets lurked in the silence between their shared history? Determined not to let fear dictate her journey, Anne returned home with additional letters tucked under her arm. They were from her aunt, hinting at fresh revelations, pulling her in like a siren's call. Sitting before the scattered batch on her kitchen table, her heart raced in anticipation and trepidation. What awaited her in those letters? She knew the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, the possibilities daunting. Yet the echo of her mother's spirit urged her forward, reminding her that understanding one's past could lead to healing. What does Anne's investigation reveal about her mother's choices? With the darkness closing in and her resolve hardening, she braced for what lay ahead. The atmosphere in the room was electric with anticipation, the family gathering marking the culmination of Anne's relentless investigations. As she stood before her father and aunt, the weight of unspoken truths hung heavily in the air. Shadows flickered across their faces, reflecting the emotional turmoil that churned within her. This was her moment, her chance to confront the two people who might help untangle the web that had ensnared their past. Taking a deep breath, Anne spoke, her voice steady, yet laced with emotion. "I know there are things that we've never talked about, things that have shaped who we are. It's time we face them together." Her heart pounded, a rhythmic drumbeat urging her to push past the fear that had held her back for too long. Her father glanced at her, tension tightening his jaw. "What do you mean, Anne?" His voice was firm, yet she could sense the tremor of uncertainty beneath it. Anne's gaze swept over her aunt, who sat quietly, her eyes glistening with unexpressed pain. "I want to understand the stories that connect us," Anne continued, her eagerness pouring out in waves. "The love, the betrayal, and the forgiveness that bind our family. All of it matters." The words hung in the air like delicate glass, ready to shatter with the slightest pressure. Her father sighed, the weight of years pressing down on him. "Some stories," he began hesitantly, "are better left untold. They can hurt more than help. But can't we choose to embrace the truth?" Anne pressed, her resolve hardening as the stories of their family's history began to spill over, weaving together unforeseen connections made from heartbreak and longing. I need to hear it. All of it. His silence spoke volumes, and in that moment of hesitation, Anne felt the first crack in the familial facade that had shielded them. Drawing in a shaky breath, she dared to confront the uncomfortable truths about her mother. The image I held of her, the one filled with strength and grace, was my own idealization. I used it to shield myself from the messiness of reality. Tears welled in her eyes, but anger kept her voice steady. What if she had her own struggles that we never acknowledged? Her aunt shifted in her seat, guilt and sorrow stringing her features taut. It was never simple, Anne. Your mother, she had her reasons. Reasons for what? Anne demanded, her voice rising with passionate intensity. For hiding feelings? For keeping secrets that spiraled through our legacy? Do you think I can just ignore that? A moment of shared discomfort clung to the air. The years of resentment, mistakes, and unspoken doubts surfacing like a turbulent tide. Anne pressed on, her resolve unyielding. I want to understand the choices you both made. I don't want to lose her memory to a fairy tale. As the discussion deepened, secrets lingered just out of reach, bringing clarity and reframing Anne's understanding of her mother's choices, a mix of both resilience and vulnerability. The cathartic dialogues nurtured healing, an interim bridge across their once fractured ties. Just as it felt like resolution was within reach, a sharp ping disrupted the fragile atmosphere. Anne's phone buzzed insistently on the table, drawing all eyes to it. There, on her screen, lay a message from an unknown sender. The moment froze, all their breaths hitching as curiosity mixed with anxiety, hinting at new developments in her mother's story. The air shifted once more, tension thickening like fog. Anne stared at the message, heart pounding, words rolling through her mind. What could this unknown sender reveal that might turn everything they'd just rediscovered upside down? Anne's breath quickened as the message from the unknown sender pulsed with urgency in her hands. The screen felt both foreign and familiar, a bridge to a past she had barely started to comprehend. Anxiety danced along her spine, tangled with a buzzing anticipation. What more could lie just beneath the surface? The weight of her mother's love letter pressed heavily on her mind, a reminder of secrets yet to unfold. Pushing the thoughts aside, she felt a surge of adrenaline. She couldn't ignore the calling any longer. She had to respond. Within moments, her phone buzzed again, an invitation to meet. The simplicity of the message both thrilled and terrified her. Was she ready to dive deeper into her mother's past? The safety of her recent discoveries beckoned her back, whispering promises of peace and understanding. Would pursuing this lead only cloud her newfound clarity? Nibbling her lip, Anne wrestled with the tug-of-war between fear and curiosity. In the end, her thirst for answers spurred her on. It was a decision born not only from a desire to uncover the truth, but from a yearning to reconnect with the woman she had lost. Arriving at the park felt like stepping into a memory. The sprawling trees swayed gently above her, their rustling leaves serenading her with echoes from her childhood, a time of laughter and family outings. The familiar sense of grass and earth wrapped around her, grounding her as she navigated feelings of nostalgia mixed with trepidation. She glanced at her phone one last time before looking up, scanning the area for any sign of this stranger who held the keys to her past. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged, an older woman with kind eyes and a presence that felt eerily familiar stepped into the light. Time slowed as realization washed over Anne. It was the woman from the photograph, the one whose existence had hovered just outside her understanding all along. The breath caught in her throat. Here she stood, not a secret hidden in the shadows, but a vivid thread woven through the tapestry of her family history. "Anne?" the woman asked, her voice soft yet powerful. "Yes," Anne replied, her heart drumming heavily in her chest. I know who you are." The woman smiled, a blend of sadness and warmth. "Your mother often spoke of you. She loved you fiercely." As the two began to share their stories, a floodgate of truths opened. The woman's words painted vibrant pictures of love and resilience, stories of sacrifices made, and dreams unfulfilled that echoed through the corridors of time, striking chords deep within Anne. Each tale revealed layers of complexity about her mother's life that she had never known, illuminating the intimate connections binding them all together. "I always thought my mother had lived a simple life," Anne confessed, her voice trembling as she absorbed the depth of their shared history. "But this," she gestured between them, "this feels like a whole other world." The woman nodded knowingly, her expression both gentle and grave. Just as Anne thought she was beginning to understand, the conversation veered sharply into unexpected territory. "There's something you need to know, Anne." The woman's tone shifted, her gaze piercing through the comfort of their exchanged warmth. "There's a part of your family's history that you don't yet understand. Something about your mother that could change everything." Anne's heart lurched as she processed the weight of those words. What could this hidden detail possibly be? An echo of dread filled the air, tantalizing and insistent, as layers of her understanding began to ripple and shift. Is ignorance truly bliss, or simply a burden waiting to be uncovered? The question loomed large in her mind, mingling with shadows of doubt. What history could this woman reveal that would reshuffle Anne's understanding of her entire family? Anne sat in the soft glow of the sunset filtering through her window, the love letter cradled in her hands like a fragile lifeline to her mother. Long after her discovery set her mind whirling, the depth of what she had found kept rising to the surface, bringing with it an unending tide of questions. What legacies of love and loss had her mother carried in silence? How many untold stories were hidden between the lines, waiting to reshape more than just memories? The weight of her mother's unspoken past pressed on Anne's heart, and she was no longer the same. "How has a family secret changed your understanding of someone you love?" she mused aloud, feeling the urgency behind the query. She envisioned all those who might resonate with her journey, grappling with their own hidden truths and familial dynamics. The answer felt like a thread woven into the fabric of their lives, connecting individuals who shared similar experiences of discovery. Tears pooled in her eyes as she reflected on her intimate connection to her mother, an understanding that had transcended even death. Although Anne felt shattered by the revelation, she understood that this journey was more about healing than unearthing pain. "What legacies do we carry?" she whispered to herself, "and how can we transform them into strength?" This question mirrored the broader human experience, speaking to the foundational ties of connection that span generations. Each letter, each tale passed down the line, crafted a narrative and a bond that often went unacknowledged. Anne resolved to embrace the stories she had discovered, to honor her mother by understanding not only the woman she had been, but also the life lessons tucked away in every corner of her existence. The notion lingered in her mind. The truth, no matter how painful, could lead her toward profound growth. The words echoed like a heartbeat, reminding her that change often comes hand in hand with uncomfortable realities. It was a chance to redefine her relationship with her past, to build resilience from the raw materials of grief and revelation. As she prepared to finish her journey shared through the video, she couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. There was something inherently beautiful about the stories they all carried, the intertwining experiences that connected them. Like this video, if you appreciated my journey and want to see more heartfelt stories, exploring the complexities of love and loss, she thought, imagining the chorus of voices joining her on this path of reflection. Subscribe to join our community as we unravel more transformative tales together. With an ever-growing sense of warmth, Anne concluded with gratitude spilling from her heart. Thank you for watching this emotional journey with us. Remember, we're all connected through our stories. Until next time, keep holding on to love and embracing the past. The closing thought was both an invitation and an embrace, reaching out to anyone who had ever felt the weight of history and the hope for healing.